Are you ready for a deep dive on the trace tool in Clo3D today? Because that's what we're working on. Hi, I'm Christina, and I love to digitally apparel pattern, creating unique pieces of wearable art. And I am super excited today to be doing a deep dive on the trace tool in Clo3D. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up my artboard, or my board that I have here going. I already have just some basic shapes on there that we're going to play around with. And if you've noticed, I am actually only in the 2D window. If you want to change it so that you're in the 3D and 2D, you can come down here to this right-hand corner and change it there. But since I'm only working in 2D, it's going to give me more space to actually do my patterning and everything like that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the tool. You can find it right over here. It's this guy right here. And it is the trace tool. It is a very handy tool to know. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to just trace an internal line and make it into a pattern. So we're going to click, and then we're going to hold shift, and we're going to click all the way around. Then we're going to, once it's fully highlighted in yellow, we're going to right click, and you'll see that there's lots of different options that we can use. We have trace as a pattern with a link, trace as an internal shape, and trace as an internal shape line. So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to trace it as a pattern, and we're going to click, and I now have that exact pattern piece off to the side. Now we're going to do the second one down, which is trace it with a pattern link. But there's also another way that you can highlight everything. So I went slowly all the way around, holding shift, highlighting each line. If you know that the piece that you want is just a shape, it's completely enclosed, you can do a double click and it will highlight that entire line, because then you won't have to go all the way around. Now, I do know some people use this trace tool when they are pattern drafting and they draft onto a sheet like this and they're making all their lines and all their marks. That way you will have to go around and click each individual line that you want, because there are multiple lines that you are creating this pattern from. So now that we have that, we're going to right click again. We're going to trace pattern link, or trace pattern with link. You can see it has everything linked, but when you actually change and start moving this pattern, it is moving the other one as well. And as you can see, the very first one that I made didn't change at all. So now that I have tweaked it, if I was looking to lay it right on top of each other, I would have some problems. So you'll just have to know, like, if you're planning to change it a lot, you might want to consider linking it. It's one of those that it's everybody has their own opinion on when it's best to link and when it's best not to link. So give it a try and see what you like. The next thing, I'm going to go highlight my trace tool again. We're going to work with this diamond shape. So I'm going to go ahead and do a double click to highlight everything. We're going to right click, oops, I unclicked off of it, there we go, right click, and we're going to trace as an internal shape. I clicked it, it doesn't look like it really did anything. So what you want to do is we're going to then highlight it, move it off, and you can see it actually was there. So it's just tracing it all the way around. The next thing that a lot of people really like to use, I'm going to get on my regular tool and we're just going to do a right click. And this isn't with the trace tool, but a lot of people think this is in the trace tool. And it's when you want to clone as an internal shape. So if I wanted to take this and create a pocket with it, I would want to clone as internal shape and click there. And then that will give you your exact placement if you want to sew this pocket onto this random square that we have. Now, the trace tool, I believe there was one more I wanted to talk about. Let's see here. Oh, traces internal lines or shape. Again, we'll click it. You'll see that it created a second one. So if you have like a baseline, which is what this line here is. Again, I did the double click and it highlighted that entire line. It highlighted the entire baseline. So that's just something to know, that then you could do, oops, double click, trace as an internal line. It now has changed my baseline to an internal line. So baselines are dotted differently. you can see this square down here is actually a baseline, and this has now been changed to an internal line. So if you're wanting to manipulate a baseline as an internal line, that's how you have to change it. If you want to get rid of a baseline, again, you go into your trace tool, highlight the baseline you want to get rid of, and hit delete. That got rid of the entire square. But if well, let's see here. We can add a baseline back in that is fun and shaped like so. So now we can see, oh, it did get it back to a baseline eventually there. But then I can delete this baseline. So when you're wanting to delete stuff, that's kind of how that works. Now, there is one other way that you can use this trace tool, and is if you want to take two patterns and kind of merge them into one. So what I'm going to do that, though, you need to have your patterns cut and placed properly. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this pattern piece over just a little bit, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to scroll in here, and we're going to add a point right across from that, so that when I highlight the entire thing, it's not highlighting this particular part of the line. Then I'm going to go ahead and move him back in, grab my trace tool, and I'm going to work all the way around. Now this is one of those times you can't just double click, you have to hold shift and click all the way around, because I don't want it to select either of those lines. And then I'm just going to go ahead, right click, trace as a pattern, and it has, oh, clicked within the pattern, something's off. So I am just a little bit off here. You do need your patterns touching where everything is. So in the other thing, I am going to move that down. And then we're going to move this out. I'm going to go ahead and delete this guy, and I'm going to replace him. There we go. Move it back in. Check the bottom. Looks good. Now we're going to go back around and do another trace. Shift. Holding that shift button down to get that. Trace as a pattern. There we have. We now have traced that pattern and we have merged it together. So this can be very handy if you're working with like a bodice and a skirt that you want to have merged together at the waist seam, but you haven't. You can trace around it and create a new pattern instead of trying to merge it and figure it out that way. So that is a super handy thing to do with the trace tool. And there we have it. That is how you can use the trace tool in Clo3D to do all sorts of things. You can create new internal lines, you can create pockets, you can create linked pockets or linked patterns, and you can also create new patterns with the trace tool. So definitely play around with that trace tool, see what works best for you, and always have some fun. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe so you can see other ways to create fun digital patterns and pieces of wearable art. I look forward to seeing you in some of my other videos. Happy patterning!